Hello and welcome to episode 2 of DayOne, a podcast by and for Cape Town to help better understand and guide the ways water flows through our city. My name's Nella Etkind and I'll be your host.
I fundamentally believe that water is a human right and we all should have access to water. For over a year, we've been coming to collect water, and when we first started coming, the queues were fairly short, and then with day zero approaching, it became quite chaotic with very long queues. But since the postponement of day zero, the queues have been shorter again. So we hope that people are not reverting back to, old habits and using more water.
We came the night before the 50-litre restriction, and it was crazy. It went out the gates over here, so it is much nicer that the queues have dwindled a bit, but it's also nice to see that people are still collecting and not just depleting, our tap water. And I also like the taste of the spring water more than I do of the tap water. The tap water is a bit grainy and a bit weird, so I prefer the actual spring water. It's nicer, I think.
To me, it tastes like a still water that I buy from the shop, so it's not that much different from there, because Cape Town, as you know, has got a very nice water. But since I come from Eastern Cape in Grahamstown, our water it's nothing compared to the water of here. If you have the money to buy it, then you can buy it, and then if you don't, or you want to come and collect this water, it's up to you.
Since we having serious problem with the water, so my husband decided that we come here to get fresh, clean water to drink. 4 years back, they've been talking about the spring, but never thought of coming here. There was no need. Now there's a need.
Last week I was here with my 3 daughters. I think it's something that they'll remember for as long as they live. Apart from all the complaints or the negativity surrounding the situation, I think some good has also come out of it. We have realized what the value of water is, and I think it has changed the way we work with water for a very long time to come.
As we just heard, the Newlands Spring is clearly an important water source in the city of Cape Town. A spring is a place where water that is collected between rock beds in the mountain seeps out of the ground. Newlands Brewery can grant the public access to the spring because it comes out of the ground and into their property. Is this an act of generosity, social responsibility, or public duty? The decision to give the public access to the spring was made in collaboration with the city in 2011. Local bars have been responding to the crisis with slogans like "Save water, drink a beer," without emphasizing 155 or so litres of water required to produce 1 litre of beer. With Day Zero now being called off this year, more and more citizens are asking how much privatization may have to do with the water crisis. Who owns water? And how does this impact our rights to access water? What is privatization anyway? Privatization refers to the transfer of management and/or ownership of a service from the public to the private sector. In this episode, we'll explore how privatization has played out in South Africa. We'll chat with Thabo Lusiti from the Environmental Monitoring Group and the Western Cape Water Caucus, who will outline research on the lived experiences of communities with water management devices. We'll learn how to decentralize our sanitation services by creating a composting loo from permaculturalist Imran Samuels. And we'll imagine a new mural illustrating what to do when it rains, recently painted in Salt River as part of the International Public Arts Festival by artist Care One Love, who describes the painting while she is painting it.
I'm worried about wasting water here.
So, who owns the water? The South African Water Act of 1998 acknowledges water as a scarce resource that must be looked after and, quote, that water belongs to the whole nation for the benefit of all people. But the combination of historical disposition of land and water resources, post-apartheid neoliberal policies, and privatization have made access to water relative to a person's access to money. One example of privatization of water is bottling and selling water. In recent months, many Cape Townians have been lining up at shops to stock up on bottled water for emergency reserves. I know I have. In our last episode, Mpumi outlined how bottled water companies are taking advantage of the day zero panic.
The companies that are putting together bottled water, I think they are happy on their side because this thing is playing in their hands and they will score big monies for these tactics of saying this day zero will be on such and such a date, and those who can afford are buying more water.
If there's bottled water in the shops, is there water in the city? Is there water for all in the city? In response to the threat of day zero, there has been generous donations of free bottled water. These donations have come from as far as Johannesburg. While this may provide immediate relief to thirsty mouths and some peace of mind for the moment, there are bigger picture factors to consider when we rethink the use of bottled water in the long term. First of all, bottled water costs as much as R2.38 per litre, compared to the 0.6 cents per litre for filtered tap water. And second, plastic bottles take 3 times as much water to produce than they can actually hold. Another example of water privatization is the city's outsourcing of local water provision services to private companies through prepaid water meters and water management devices. Pilot projects for prepaid water meters began in Johannesburg in 2001. Since then, communities and social movements across South Africa have been speaking about the injustice of these devices, which significantly infringe on their access to water. Although prepaid water meters have been installed in low-income communities in South Africa with the purpose of conserving water or managing debt, for poorer households, they have mostly left households with an inadequate amount of water for meeting basic needs. These devices have not been introduced in middle-class households, which sends the message that if you can pay for water, you can use as much water as you would like. In 2007, the city of Cape Town rolled out water management devices in low-income communities. Next, we'll hear from Thabo Lisiti, a staff member from the Environmental Monitoring Group. He'll tell us about the work of the South African Water Caucus and what they've learned with communities who have water management devices installed into their households.
The South African Water Caucus is a network of NGOs, community-based organizations, and interested individuals in terms of wanting to bring justice, in the water sector. They come together to share ideas, share solutions, looking at what policy is saying and what's happening on the ground and what are the lived experiences, and then use that to kind of engage with government. We have 7 caucuses and they are all having different strengths. Some are meeting regularly because there's an NGO that is based in that province which is putting resources for those caucuses to meet. Like, for example, the Western Cape Water Caucus meets regularly because our activities are also embedded at EMG.
Can you tell us a little bit about how the Western Cape Water Caucus is engaging with the current water challenge we face?
Okay. Firstly, the South African Water Caucus has been dealing with different crises. There's a crisis around governance around South Africa, around Department of Water and Sanitation. So we've written a report highlighting the policy challenges that are there. There's policies that are left hanging. So the caucus at national level, we are dealing with those. Some people want us to act urgently and quickly, but for us, we like this process kind of approach.
Water management devices were first introduced in 2007. By mid-2015, around 140,000 such devices had been installed in the city of Cape Town. In 2009, the EMG and the Western Cape Water Caucus led an action-based research project exploring the on-the-ground experiences of water management devices in various communities. Thabo summarizes the findings of this research.
The water management device is just, I don't like to use this, a smart meter. It's set to give you a set allocation, of 350 liters per day in a household of 4. It's also above the allocation of national government of 6,000 liters of water per month. So it gives you that, and then if it's all used up, the meter cuts off, and then you'll get your allocation the next day. On paper, that's how it worked, But what we found is that there was no public participation in these communities. No one came to present these devices. People did not get the proper education that was needed. Most people that we spoke to, they said the people just only talked about the device and how it will make your life easier in terms of the debt. And the response time when the device is not working, it was not great at all. In some cases, it cut off and the water doesn't come for days. In Atlantis, there were households that didn't have water for 3 to 2 months, same as in Danun. In some areas, the leaks, they were visible. Some of the leaks were even from the meter itself. And then also this property owner not being around, and then the kid just signs, and then when you come back home, there's a device. There was those kind of issues. It's unfair for the device to be targeted to only poor working class communities. In fact, that if I afford, I can use as much as I can, but if I can't afford, I need to be restricted. It's not sending a good message. When you speak to people, they were saying we've been saving water for years. They even gave us water management devices. How much more we can save? They must go to those who have swimming pools to tell them that they must save water. So that's what the message the city has been saying for a long time. If you're poor, restrictions. If you are rich, use as much as you want. People are feeling that they have been treated unfairly. As we know, the cutoff and the day zero, people have been queuing for water for a long time. So this is not new for them. So we need to also find ways of how we work with government that are not only bringing tensions between them and civil society, but finding a way that we can work with them, in terms of coming up with solutions. We are also understanding that they are also in a panic mode, some of them, because some of them, this is the first time dealing with this kind of a crisis. So I think for us, it's about building this relationship between government and communities. The time now for government to see us as consumers, it should be ending. It's time now they see partners.
That's how it's finished. It's finished.
In the media earlier this year, the city claimed that it has installed over 33,000 water management devices at the homes of high users and is installing more every week. While our city has evolved to be dependent on these centralized water provision systems that are hard for citizens to have control and ownership over, there are still some people who are thinking of alternatives. Next, we consider one that relates to sanitation. What is the local sanitation situation? Out of the 1.2 million households in the city of Cape Town, just over 1 million households have access to flush toilets. Around 61,000 households must still make use of other sanitation services like pit latrines, which are outside hole-dug toilets, bucket toilets, while 10,629 households don't even have access to sanitation services. For those with flush facilities, toilets can use between 13 and 6 litres of water per flush. Is there a way we can make sanitation more equal and less water intensive? A local permaculturist, Imran Samuels, who hosts outdoor co-learning workshops out of his own backyard, better known as Gorilla House, offers one approach for us to sit with.
We are wasting a lot of water with our sewage system. In the human manure handbook, which is the Bible of human manure, they say that for every kilogram of feces that you flush down the toilet, it takes about 1,000 litres just to process it, to get it to the treatment system, and then from there to wherever it needs to go, which is usually the ocean or other water bodies.
Can you tell us a little bit about just the basics of how a composting toilet works?
With composting toilets, there's 2 parts to the system. There's your collection system, and then there's your processing system. So your collection system is just any kind of receptacle that you can collect your deposits in. There's quite a few different types of it, and for true sustainability, it always has to be context specific. So there's no one size fits all or silver bullet when it comes to any of this stuff. But yeah, so you've got your collection system and then you've got your processing systems. Someone needs to make sure that everyone's buckets are being emptied properly onto this compost heap, and that, you know, the correct cover material is being used and the balance of carbon and nitrogen is being maintained. So the nitrogen comes from your urine and your feces, and then any other organic matter which you may add to the system, kitchen waste, food scraps, stuff like that. Yeah. So the carbon is sourced in the form of either sawdust or straw or even compost material or mulch, which is just, you know, organic matter, newspapers, cardboard, shredded up, any of those things. And the types of processing systems you get are compost heaps, something's called thermophilic composting. So when you make a proper compost heap with the correct carbon and nitrogen balance, the microorganisms do their magic and the pile can reach up to about 70 degrees, sometimes even higher. In a backyard setup, you'll on average get about 30, 40, 50 degrees. But at 50 degrees, maintained for about 24 hours, you eliminate all pathogens. That's your worms, that's your viruses, that's your bacteria, all your harmful guys in those categories. We don't necessarily have to spend anything. You could source second-hand buckets, you could repurpose old bottles, old containers, even just using plastic bags, dust bags, you know, as your collection system. In terms of the processing system, organic matter is quite abundant everywhere, but I do know in the more impoverished spaces it is less common. If you've got some space in your urban space, say it's an apartment complex, and where they usually store the wheelie bins, those same wheelie bins can be used as processing systems. So I think for about a cube, it takes one family of 6 people, can take a year longer to fill. So you need quite a little space to process quite a lot of material. Besides the fact of the amount of water that we're wasting, there's also the amount of nutrients that we're losing, in which we as humans produce every single day. Like I mentioned earlier, an average human produces about 450 kilograms of perfectly recoverable agri-nutrients every single year. We're losing our fertile land for growing food. We're not getting any more, and our population is increasing, while at the same time our topsoil is decreasing every single year. And this is one way that we can reclaim and rebuild our topsoil, but at the same time saving water. You know, a win-win in that sense.
This is a great example of how creative problem solving to save water can potentially lead to solutions in other areas too. This may not work for those who do not have that much space or time and capacity to manage the careful balances involving the maintaining of composting loos. One place that might have space and time is a school. Imagine that composting loos were built into a school curriculum. What learning could come from this in-practice sustainability act? What if schools could even start a garden on the side too? So it rained on February 13th and then again on the 23rd. Yay! Cape Townians talked about the buckets they placed in their gardens and on their balconies to catch this gift. Maybe the thunderstorm sent us a message. What is it? A sign of hope? A test to see that we are prepared to make the most of the water resources when they are available? Building on the topic of private versus public, we go now to a visual artist, Care One Love, busy painting in a public space with a message about what to do if and when it finally rains.
I paint murals on walls, sometimes in public spaces, sometimes in private spaces, sometimes for schools, restaurants, businesses, and sometimes just for myself. I am this week painting as part of the International Public Art Festival, which is happening around Salt River. I have a wall here which is on a private residency in a little cul-de-sac next to a field. The central theme of this painting is a child. The child is quite a large scale. It's right the sort of height of the building. So it's like the idea of a giant child. Children are normally seen as not as important as citizens in terms of decision making and development. So this is seeing the child as very important in development, and that children have a lot to contribute, even in terms of science and thinking and creativity. So this is a painting of a child that's kind of playing with an umbrella and has turned the umbrella upside down. So instead of guarding from the rain, it's actually acting as a water catchment for the rain. And the umbrella is also like a cityscape. Along the edges of the umbrella we see buildings and Table Mountain and some houses and things. So it's like the city is the catchment. There's also references to other nature elements, a tortoise, a chameleon, a sugarbird, and some fynbos, other elements that are part of our city. When we see that there's fynbos, so we see an amazing bird, we see a chameleon, then we know that the ecosystem is healthy. So my hope is that if we keep painting these elements into our city space, then our cities will become more interconnected, integrated with nature, and more healthy ecosystems. And then the other aspect is remembering the ancient connection that we have with the Khoisan people of this land. So the Khoisan people originally were guardians of the waterways, the sacred waters that came from the mountain. So it's just remembering that there are these springs that our development is covered over, and maybe as we develop and change our water systems, we need to take into account those ancient waterways and bring them back up. I enjoy giving a voice to conversations or research that might just be filed away or online or in a journal, but not really accessible to people. So the art is like a bridge between information and people, and then on that bridge, hopefully lots of people have conversations and it sparks other ideas or projects or connections. We've used an eco-friendly wall paint, and we're trying to use less spray cans to achieve the same effects. You can find my mural alongside another very beautiful nature mural of a huge leopard and a waterfall and exciting things by a lovely Finnish artist called Sala. We've been working together in this cul-de-sac in Salt River, so the cul-de-sac's name is Robin's Road. A cool thing earlier, there was a granny walking with her little baby. He was probably under a year, and she spent about an hour in this cul-de-sac just taking him around, pointing out all the animals and the plants and the shapes, and she was teaching him words and he was looking at the paintings. I haven't really thought about art in a public space is also a way for babies to learn about the animals or plants, learn words. It's quite cool.
Speaking of mural painting, we found one young artist in a line to collect water at the Newlands Spring.
I just helped to paint the tuck shop. This artist came and he drew some shapes with black paint, and then we just had to color it inside.
Was there a message?
Not with that one, but at the back of the school there's one.
And what was that message?
Water is more precious than gold.
What do you think about that statement?
I think it's definitely true. I think Nico has something to say.
Yeah, I was also painting the tuck shop.
What about that statement that your sister, is it?
Chloe.
Yeah, about water being more precious than gold. What do you think about that?
I think that's amazing, very cool.
Water is more precious than gold!
Imagine if water became the new gold. Would we let it run along the gutters into the ocean like we do now? Would we be able to pay for it as much as we wanted? With what would we pay for it, if it is the most precious thing? Would we consider adopting a composting toilet? Importantly, would we save it and hoard it like we do with our gold? Or would we find a way to treasure it as a public good, protect it and use it for benefit for all? How might we reimagine exchange based on water economy? Partners exchanging water jewelry as an anniversary gift. Winning athletes receiving water medals as trophies. Elders replacing their dentures with water teeth. Let those imaginations flow. Can there be any forms of privatization that benefit the public? South African breweries have expressed an interest in bottling and distributing water from the Newlands Spring. Is it possible This can make the spring more accessible to people who cannot travel there to collect water themselves. And what impact will water-related decisions make on the brewery's partners who are barley farmers? Guys, please let us know what you think. For more information, to send in the responses, suggestions or questions, please go to www.dayonewater.wordpress.com.